Scotland. The very word evokes a wealth of images. A land rich in legend and tradition, in sound and colour. Scotland also provides a journey of discovery, where much of the landscape remains wild and remote, echoing the drama and spectacle of a romantic past. Come along as we explore the beauty and splendour of Scotland, land of legends. Scotland is part of the British Isles, sharing a border with England to the south. The main land mass is 275 miles long and 150 miles wide at its broadest point. Scottish territory extends to the west coast islands of the Hebrides and the Orkney and Shetland Islands to the north. From kilts to whisky, haggis to bagpipes, Scotland's unique identity is reflected in its wide variety of national treasures. One of the country's oldest and most celebrated exports is the game of golf. It's thought that the game of golf was started by medieval shepherds, heading sheep dung with their crooks out of boredom. Golf historian Bobby Burnett agrees.
That's quite a good idea because there were sheep on the course. They were the first lawn mowers, you see. They definitely kept what fairways there were more or less cropped. And for bunkers, the sheep in bad weather, which you've met, would huddle together in some hollow, and the sand was never very far down, so the hooves would go through, and very soon you had a nicely made bunker, very, very crude, but there it was, and you had all the makings of a golf course in that kind of way.
In the mid-15th century, King James II complained that the game of golf was distracting his subjects from archery practice, and was therefore a threat to the country's defence. This distraction apparently remained irresistible. Today there are more than 400 golf courses in Scotland, including the old course in the town of St Andrews, home to the game's governing body, the Royal and Ancient Golf Club. The public course is narrow and windswept, but its historical significance has made it a mecca for pros and amateurs alike.
So there are many European versions of bagpipe, but probably the Scots one's the most developed and perhaps the most musical one, certainly one of the noisiest.
You start with a practice chanter to learn the bagpipes. Then you go from that onto a set of bagpipes, and that should last your lifetime and your son or whoever pass it down.
Joe Hagan is well known in the world of bagpipes as a creator. His handmade pipes of blackwood and silver are sold all over the world. Bert Rowan, who works in the shop with Joe, has taught the instrument to students of all ages. He resists the notion that piping requires physical strength.
I have a pupil, a girl of 9 years of age, and she plays a full set of bagpipes. And if a bagpipe is properly reeded and in good condition, you don't have to be 6 feet tall and be built like a big tank to play it.
The romantic image of the lone Highland piper, knee-deep in mist, takes something of a twist here in Glasgow, where street musicians celebrate the pipe in the midst of busy shoppers. With a population of 780,000 people, Glasgow is Scotland's largest city. George Square, designed in 1781, is the centre of modern Glasgow, drawing a lunchtime crowd on warm summer days. Forming the eastern edge of the square is Glasgow's City Chambers, a magnificent Victorian structure completed in 1888. The interior is designed in the Italian Renaissance style, with marble columns and vaulted ceilings. The City Chambers is one of many Victorian buildings to be found in central Glasgow, a legacy from the 18th century merchants who grew rich on imports of tobacco and cotton. Many of Glasgow's buildings have been renovated, restoring the city's Victorian charm. Flowing through the heart of Glasgow is the River Clyde. 200 years ago, this river was shallow enough at low tide to wade across. It was dredged in the 18th century, allowing Glasgow to flourish for a time as a shipbuilding centre, where famous passenger liners, such as the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth, were built. Glasgow is home to one of Scotland's most popular art museums, the Burrell Collection, which opened in 1983. The gallery houses some of the 8,500 items given to the city by Sir William Burrell, a wealthy shipping agent. Burrell began collecting as a teenager and made his final purchase 2 weeks before his death in 1958 at the age of 96. In his 80 years of collecting, Burrell always bought for enjoyment, not for investment. Curator Rosemary Watt explains.
He put together the collection to please himself, primarily. He started with English 18th century portraits, he went on to French Impressionists, he collected, in particular, medieval material from Northern Europe, tapestry, stained glass, and the section that we're standing in now, the Oriental, ceramics and Chinese bronzes.
To ensure the safety of his collection, Burrell attached a long list of conditions to his deed of gift.
One of the stipulations of the deed of gift in 1944 was that we should not, under any circumstances, lend over water. He was a shipping agent. He did not trust the sea.
Central Glasgow has a lively shopping district that extends south and west of the city chambers. But bargain hunters save themselves for the weekend market known as the Barras.
Would anybody else like a set? Bid me £10 now. Is there anybody else coming in at £10?
Year-round, rain or shine, some 800 merchants sell their wares as they have for the past 100 years.
Are you all separate? What colour, love? Peach, God bless you, dear.
You know apples there? I haven't any apples. Pears are lovely. You want a pear? Right for 50. They're lovely.
Give it for 50 dear. Can it be dear for 50 pence? There's two bits the same, get a whole lot, 50 pence. Come, what did it say?
Barras means barrow and harkens back to the days when traders sold their goods here from wheelbarrows. Although Victorian architecture dominates the city, Glasgow's most famous designer challenged its conventions. In 1896, a young architect named Charles Rennie Mackintosh won a design competition for the Glasgow School of Art. The structure, with its huge plate glass windows, was a startling contrast to the more traditional city chambers. In 1902, Mackintosh received a commission from publisher Walter Blackie to build a home overlooking the River Clyde. For Mackintosh, it was a plum assignment, for Blackie gave him free rein in designing the home inside and out. The result was Hill House, a functional home reminiscent of Scottish baronial castles. Hill House is located 5 miles west of Loch Lomond, the largest and perhaps most beautiful lake in Scotland. The 24-mile-long waterway is just 20 miles north of Glasgow, making it a popular recreation spot for Glaswegians. Glasgow itself provides its citizens with 70 public parks and gardens, giving credence to Glasgow's ancient Gaelic name, which means dear green place. Every weekend, the Riverside Club draws a crowd of all ages for a Scottish gathering called a Céilí. A Céilí is a Gaelic get-together, recalling the days when villagers would gather together for a night of Gaelic song and dance. The ancient Celtic language, once so prevalent along the seaboard, is barely heard today on the mainland of Scotland. To hear it spoken, one must travel to the Hebrides.
Gaelic, agus a sin ka brian an hea hula la, atorach in the sinyelan has to brian the Gaelic, ach as I would have preferred to be speaking Gaelic every day and really disregarding the English altogether, but we can't do that.
Jonathan MacDonald lives off the western coast of Scotland on the Isle of Skye, famous for its rugged beauty and varied terrain. 50 miles long and 10 to 20 miles broad, Skye, known as the Misty Isle, is the largest island of the Inner Hebrides.
We don't really feel that Skye has any claim to mist more than any other island, but when we do have it, it certainly adds impression to our scenery and adds myth and splendour to what is really a majestic island.
Jonathan MacDonald is the curator of the Museum of Island Life. It's an open-air museum depicting the lifestyle in Skye a century ago, when communal farming townships called crofts were common.
We do have gales on occasions and some wild weather, so that these houses were well insulated, very stoutly built. They thought of streamlining long before the scientists thought of it.
Today, 11,000 people live on the island, with 2,000 in the capital of Portree, the only town on Skye. The name Portree was derived from a Gaelic term meaning King's Port. It honours James V, who came to Skye in 1540 to assert his sovereignty over the rebellious clan chiefs who called themselves Lords of the Isles. Dunvegan Castle, a massive fortress on the west coast of Skye, continues to house the clan chief of MacLeod, as it has for 7 centuries. Clan is a Gaelic word meaning children. The Scottish clan system began in the 6th century. Landowners first began staking their territories in the isolated regions of the Highlands and the Western Isles, claiming both the land and the people living there. The landlord became the clan chief. Every person on his land bore his name and swore allegiance to him. Loyalty to the clan chief came before loyalty to the crown. The MacLeods and the MacDonalds were the 2 most powerful island clans and continued their rivalry until well into the 17th century. The island of Mull is the 3rd largest island in the Inner Hebrides, with a 300-mile coastline. Like Skye, Mull is known for its rough and rolling terrain, but also for the 10,000 red deer that wander the landscape. Lying off the southwest corner of Mull is the tiny island of Iona, just 3 miles long and 1 mile wide. This remote treeless island is reached only by passenger ferry and must be explored on foot. Iona is considered the birthplace of Scottish Christianity and has for centuries been a place of pilgrimage. St. Columba arrived here from Ireland in 563 AD to build a monastery. The cemetery is the oldest Christian burial place in Scotland. All 48 Scottish monarchs are thought to be buried here, including Macbeth and Duncan, both made famous in the William Shakespeare play Macbeth. 90 miles off the north coast of Scotland is the island of Shetland, 350 square miles of stark, treeless terrain skirted with sheer cliffs and home to thousands of seabirds. Sprawling above the jagged coastline are the Haraldsarf ruins, one of Scotland's most important and complex archaeological sites. Beginning in the Bronze Age, this site was occupied for more than 3,000 years by various civilizations, including the Vikings.
So I suppose as long as mankind has been in Shetland, they've been cutting peat here.
The hills in Shetland are covered with peat, a spongy turf used as a major source of fuel. Today, peat cutting is done commercially, but many islanders, like policeman Colin Gunn, pay £2 a plot to do it the old-fashioned way.
When it dries, it becomes quite hard and brittle, and it burns extremely well. Good peat from this area, I'm told, would have half the calorific value of coal. So it's quite an efficient way of gathering fuel, and the exercise is good as well.
Shetland seems far removed from the world of kilts and bagpipes. The island has its own history and its own identity. Along with the world-renowned Shetland fiddler is another famous island native, the Shetland pony.
Keep her straight, Bella. Good girl. Hold them in. Brilliant! You're a star! Right, come on, Carrie. And Carrie. Come on, pick your feet
Every
up,
weekend, local children take riding lessons at Helen Thompson's farm, a breeding and training centre for Shetland ponies. Helen says a pony is usually ready by age 4 to be ridden by a child.
If you start them too early, they're a bit like a over-clever child. They'll take advantage of a small rider. If you wait until they're at least 4, then they're that little bit more mature and they'll settle more quickly and learn more quickly.
No one's sure of the origin of the Shetland pony, but it is thought they date back at least to the 9th century. They were often used as beasts of burden, carrying peat down from the hills, but today they are bred purely for enjoyment and show. Although the market for Shetland ponies is almost entirely outside of Shetland, the ponies are best suited to their sparse, native environment.
They don't need an awful lot to eat. They're very good food converters. They can survive on very little.
Another island native, the Shetland sheep thrives on harsh conditions and a Spartan diet. 300,000 of them cover the island, outnumbering people 12 to 1. These hardy sheep produce a fine soft wool in white, grey, black and brown that is spun into yarn at a local mill. For the past 500 years, this wool has been used to make Shetland's beautiful handmade knitwear. Lerwick is the capital of Shetland and home to 7,500 people, 1/3 of the island's population. The natural harbour has accommodated fishermen since the 17th century. 5 times a week, the overnight ferry from Lerwick travels south to Aberdeen, Scotland's 3rd largest city. The city's award-winning gardens led Aberdeen to be dubbed the flower of Scotland. But to the local economy, the scent of another product smells just as sweet.
6, 7, shot! 57, shot! 8!
Every weekday morning, cod, haddock and lemon sole join other fish on the auction block at the fish market.
106, 106 bell, 108, 110, 110, 12, 112.
Aberdeen has been a major port town since the 12th century, and today the modern harbour also provides services for the North Sea oil industry. As if fish, flowers and oil weren't enough to keep the city on the map, Aberdeen is even more famous for another natural resource, granite. The local quarries have yielded millions of tons of stone. Blocks of pink, blue and grey granite lend subtle pastel shades of beauty to every home. The unyielding permanence of the stone adds an air of stateliness to mansions and small cottages alike. The handiwork of Aberdeen's master masons can be seen beyond the city as well, in the baronial castles and tower houses dotting the countryside. Many surviving castles, such as Castle Fraser, retain the battlement style of earlier days. Although Scottish lairds of the 16th century no longer needed to live in such fortified structures, they continued to build them, mainly because stone was so plentiful. Crathy's Castle, completed in 1594, was also built of granite. The walls are 5 feet thick at the base and slope in 3 inches at the top. Although only fragments remain visible, the ceiling of the High Hall, located on the castle's ground floor, was at one time fully painted. The laird held court here, or in the long gallery which extends the full width of the top floor. Its original oak-panelled ceiling remains intact. Crathy's Castle boasts magnificent gardens. Although the flowers, fountains and walking paths are a great delight, there is a more striking feature of the castle grounds. Large yew hedges planted in 1702 frame, sculpt and even add a touch of whimsy to the garden. Perhaps the most intriguing castle in northern Scotland is one that lays in ruin near the River Don. Shortly after its completion in the 13th century, Kildrummy Castle began its tragic existence as the site of many bloody confrontations between Scotland and England. During a time of Scottish rule in 1306, Robert the Bruce sent his family to Kildrummy for safety before fleeing into exile. But the fugitives were soon betrayed to the enemy by the local blacksmith, after the English promised him as much gold as he could carry. He set the castle on fire, and Kildrummy again fell into English hands. The promise made to the blacksmith was honoured. The reward of molten gold was poured down his throat. In the Speyside village of Aberlour, a family-run firm continues to create a Scottish product from a century-old recipe.
Shortbread is neither a biscuit, nor is it a cake, nor is it a cookie, nor is it a confection.
For James Walker, shortbread cannot be categorized as any other type of bakery product. It can only be defined as shortbread.
Not to be confused with short cake, because short cake is a type of biscuit which is made with vegetable fat rather than butter. But shortbread is made only with pure butter, flour, sugar and salt.
Since 1960, James Walker, along with his brother and sister, have been making the now famous Walker shortbread, using the same recipe created by their grandfather in his village bakery back in 1898.
We make shortbread more or less exactly the same way that we've always made it, and we make it the same way that a housewife would in her kitchen.
The recipe is pure and simple: flour, sugar, butter and salt. The success of the baker lies in the proportions of each and the method of preparation.
You know, one of the secrets for us is the fact that all our shortbread is wrapped as soon as it's cool, so that it stays very fresh and crisp until it reaches the final consumer.
Walker's shortbread has come a long way since its beginnings in a small village bakery. Today the company makes 200 tons of shortbread per week and sells to more than 30 countries around the world. but the Scots retain their own special way of enjoying it.
In Scotland, it's very often eaten with a glass of whiskey.
Whiskey? Well, what do you say about whiskey? You should try it.
Most people, if they've heard about Scotland, it's whiskey they've heard of.
Cutting across the heart of the Highlands is Scotland's second longest river, the Spey, fed by mountain springs. The peaty water and crops of barley helped turn this area into one of Scotland's major malt whisky producers.
I think there are 150 different malts produced in Scotland. I've tried quite a few of them. It's an excellent drink.
Well, I think you'd have to sample the Scotch first of all, and then you know what we're talking about. It's very Moorish. You have one and you want more.
The Glenfiddich distillery is one of 8 malt whisky distilleries located on a 70-mile stretch of the River Spey. The company was founded in 1887 by William Grant and has stayed a family business for 5 generations. While the bottling process has been modernized over the years, Grant's traditional recipe remained unchanged. The basic process from malting through distillation takes just 6 days. But the secret of great Scotch whisky lies in the 8 years or more that it takes to mature. Lurking beneath the wind-swept reaches of the great Loch Ness lies Scotland's greatest mystery. Monster? Beast? Friend? Foe? For hundreds of years, reported sightings of a reptilian creature have stimulated the imagination, spawning myth and song.
Well, I have wandered up and down the Loch Ness a lot and have never seen him. Yes, looked for him at all times. But the people say up there he has been seen.
But my father certainly saw something a few nights ago, and as I say, he's not a stupid man, so I believe him.
There's no ifs or buts in my mind. There is definitely something there.
It was also going against the way the waves were going, so it was something underneath the water that was of an immense proportion.
Oh, there must be something there. No, I've never seen it, but there must be something there.
I think there's been too many genuine, honest sightings of something for it to be completely put aside as being just a figment of the imagination. There is something there.
The Loch Ness Monster Exhibition Centre opened in 1980. The exhibits document the sightings that have occurred over the centuries and the attempts to find a scientific explanation. Curator Betty Gallagher.
Well, over the years, you've had the various surface photography, which really isn't adequate because you can see the size of the loch. It's 23 miles long and it's 750 feet deep and it's a mile wide. There's a lot of water.
The breakthrough came in 1987 with Operation Deep Scan. Sophisticated sonar beamed below from a fleet of 20 boats picked up 5 strong moving targets.
This is the main thing, the moving target. So it's mainly sonar. There's no other tool to use, in fact, on Loch Ness because of its depth and its darkness, and it's cold, very cold.
Many of the sightings have occurred near the ruins of Urquhart Castle, a 12th century fortress on a promontory overlooking Loch Ness. While most people who believe in the Loch Ness Monster feel there is one large animal, results of the sonar investigation raise the theory that as many as 10 to 15 smaller creatures may exist.
We haven't had any bones found or bits found, but that's explainable as well. I can explain that so easily, it's so quickly, because it's so freezing cold. Anything that dies is held in suspense, goes to the bottom. There's no gaseous decomposition. The acids from the malm that's washed in from the various hills gets to work on anything soft and fleshy, and it disappears into the silt. There's no mystery about that.
The real mystery for scientists is why these shy, deep-water animals would be seen on the surface at all. It may be because they're as curious about us as we are about them. 15 miles west of the exhibition centre, the famous River Ness runs through the centre of the Highland capital of Inverness. This modern town of 41,000 people suffered greatly in the past as a popular battleground of feuding Highland clans. 5 miles east of Inverness is the Culloden battlefield, site of the last battle fought on British soil. On April 16th, 1746, Prince Charles Edward Stuart, known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, and his army of Highlanders were outnumbered and defeated by the King's army of Redcoats. Bonnie Prince Charlie escaped to France, but here in the Highlands, the battle sparked the end of the clan system. For the next 36 years, the Highlanders' kilt, which they had worn into battle, was banned.
The first kilts actually to be worn again after that, the proper kilt, was in 1822 when George IV came back up to Edinburgh. He was the first British monarch to come over from England, and he came over and he decided that the kilt should then be worn again in its form as we see it today.
Kenneth Cairns is a kilt maker who is well versed in the proper way to wear the traditional Highland dress.
These are the gilly brogues, laced up to the front. Then you have the white hose, flashes, purely ornamental, to tie in with the colour on your main colour on your kilt. The skene dhu, which is Gaelic for black knife. This is a very dangerous weapon. It's very sharp, purely decorative again. The kilt pin, roughly 6 to 7 inches up from the selvage edge on the kilt. The sporran, just worn at a comfortable level, so that when the jacket, you never button a kilt jacket, so when the kilt jacket is open, the sporran fits just at the cut of the jacket.
Each kilt is made by hand using 8 yards of material. The bulk of it in back, where 24 pleats are essential for that special Scottish swing.
When you're walking along the street, and if you've got a good wiggle going, you can feel the kilt swinging. And there's nothing nicer, as far as I'm told, than watching a Scotsman walking along the street with his kilt swinging.
Here in the Northern Highlands are the unspoiled landscapes that Scotland is known for, a vast wilderness of lonely moorland and rugged peaks. But the Highlands of Scotland continue southwest of Inverness towards Fort William and Mallaig, where the interplay of inland lakes and steep-sided hills is one of the most scenic areas in Scotland. In the far southern region known as the Borders, the dramatic scenery of the Highlands relaxes into gentle green pasture and lush river glens. Running through the heart of the Borders is Scotland's famous fishing river, the Tweed. During the fishing season, anglers come from all over the world to fish for salmon and trout in this beautiful setting. In a secluded woodland above the Tweed, the ruins of Dryborough Abbey retain a tranquil beauty. The abbey is one of 4 in the area, all inhabited by monks during the 12th and 13th centuries. On the north bank of the Tweed stands the literary landmark of Abbotsford, the home of Sir Walter Scott. Scott lived at Abbotsford for the last 20 years of his life. the house is still occupied by his descendants, who keep the rooms just as they were when Scott was alive. Scott was an avid collector of historical relics, and his home is filled with souvenirs and mementos. In 1815, he visited the battlefield at Waterloo and returned with Napoleon's cloak clasp and scarred suits of armour. Several of Scott's works, including Lady of the Lake, were published by the time he moved to the borders from Edinburgh. But it was here at Abbotsford that Scott wrote most of his novels, including Ivanhoe. A few miles north of Dryborough Abbey, on a ridge high above the Tweed, is a panoramic vista known as Scott's View. This typical border scene of rolling hills and flowing water was a favourite of Sir Walter Scott's. In 1832, his mile-long funeral procession passed by here on the way to his final resting place at the Abbey.
They're a conglomeration of various breeds, and they ended up making the Border Collie, which is all shapes and sizes. So you've got black ones, small ones, big ones, smooth ones, and that's what makes the Border Collie. These hills have evolved the Border Collie as it is.
The Border Collie is a medium-sized sheepdog known for its herding abilities. And here, in the upper reaches of the Tweed Valley, sheep farmer Jeff Billingham has devoted his life to working with and writing about these indispensable canines.
Oh, they're absolutely vital. They couldn't do the work without them, particularly in the hills. I mean, there's vast areas to gather with sheep, unruly sheep, wild sheep. You need a dog sometimes to be rough. If you've got say 600 ewes with the lambs, they need a bit of force behind them. And the dog should be able to do that when necessary, but at lambing time, this approach has got to be completely different, because they've got to be kinder to the sheep. They've got to be patient, because there's little lambs that don't want to herd. Steady, Cap. Cap, here.
Jeff believes that quiet commands work best with his dogs, Cap and Peg.
Some handlers are very noisy. It's far better if you give quiet commands to the dogs. They respond a lot better to a quiet handler than a noisy handler. I'll give you a walk-up whistle, which I use. They can either walk up with this whistle or fetch with the same whistle. One of the right flanks for Cap here is away, you see. And God knows where he'll end up. End up in the next county.
Although Cap and Peg are hard-working by nature, blind obedience is not their most important attribute.
Sagacity, bravery, fidelity, they stick to the one master through thick and thin, whatever happens, you know. Well, you build up the relationship. If you like the dog, from a pup, you've got to get this tremendous bond that I like to get, is a bond between them that you build up over the years. It doesn't just appear. It's a bond that, say, you get with your brother or your mother.
Where there are sheep, there are textiles, an industry integral to the local economy. Peter Anderson's woolen mill in the town of Galashiels is just one of many in the border area. Since 1804, the process at the mill has continued to be an intricate, hands-on affair. If one thread breaks on the loom, the system stops until it's repaired. In the darning stage, every inch of fabric is examined by hand for any faults. The company produces the world's largest selection of wool worsted tartans, more than 700 different designs. A few miles west of Galashiels stands Traquair House, the oldest inhabited house in Scotland. The house dates mainly from the 17th century, although remnants of an ancient tower are still a part of the structure. Inside the rooms reflect 500 years of occupation by the same family. The furnishings a mix of old and new design. The 18th century library with its antique reading chair has more than 3,500 books, all non-fiction except for 2 novels, Robinson Crusoe and Pamela, Virtue Rewarded. The guest book at Traquair House includes visits by 24 members of Scottish and English royalty, including Mary Queen of Scots, who slept in the King's room with her infant son. And just what is a haggis?
Well, some people would tell you it's a wee beast, or a bird, that runs around amongst the heather with 2 long legs and 2 short legs.
Well, it's flocks. You know, if you see partridge or grouse, then you see the same little coveys of haggis. They're like in coveys, you know, groups of them.
And they run round the mountain that way, hence they never fall over, and that's how they're hard to catch. They don't run up and down, they run round it.
Haggis is not only Scotland's national dish, it is also a somewhat humorous national treasure.
And when you've got 1 long leg and 1 short leg for running clockwise round the hill, and you turn round, what do? You fall over and you roll right to the bottom. And at the bottom we've got the haggis catchers, who quickly catch them up.
John McSween is actually very knowledgeable when it comes to the real story of haggis. His Edinburgh butcher's shop makes 2,000 pounds of this popular dish every day.
It's Scotland's national dish, I think. It's really poor man's food.
And it's normally served with what we call bashed neeps and chappet tatties, which is mashed turnip and mashed potatoes.
It's the most warming and the most nourishing and the cheapest sort of food that you can get. It's got a rather unpleasant recipe to it.
Haggis is a very economical dish with very humble ingredients. The process starts at 4:30 in the morning at McSween's shop with the boiling of hearts, livers and lungs of sheep. Then it's ground up, mixed with Scottish oatmeal and spices and stuffed in a casing. Haggis became firmly established as the national dish more than 200 years ago after poet Robert Burns, the Bard of Scotland, wrote his famous Ode to the Haggis.
And dish her out her billow fair. Old Scotland wants nae skinking ware that jouts and luggies, but if you wish her grateful prayer, gie her a haggis.
John McSween says that while many countries have a dish similar to haggis, the Scots have a special way of making it their own.
Some people call it haggis gravy. Some people pour it over their haggis, but everywhere you have it, it's called whiskey, Scotch whiskey.
That's gorgeous. Haggis is grand with neeps and tatties. Yes. Served all together, and you sit and have that with oat cakes, maybe a glass of milk, maybe a Scotch. Scotch is better.
Sitting atop an extinct volcano, Edinburgh Castle dominates the skyline of Scotland's capital city with its dark and brooding presence. The word Edinburgh is derived from a Celtic phrase meaning fortress on hill. The castle stands on a strategic position, considered a good defensive site when built in the 5th century. In the Crown Room, the sceptre and sword are on display, the oldest regalia in Europe. The crown was last used in 1651 for the coronation of King Charles II. The medieval banquet hall with its open timber roof was used on ceremonial occasions, including the infamous Black Dinner. In 1440, Scotland was ruled by King James II, then just 8 years old. The child's guardians, charged with protecting the throne, worried about the growing power of the Douglas clan. A royal banquet was planned, and the 14-year-old Earl of Douglas and his younger brother were invited to the castle. A black bull's head, the symbol of death, was carried into the hall, and the two young Douglases were murdered. Today, Edinburgh is a small city of nearly 500,000 people and appears to be two towns in one. The area known as Old Town extends from the castle down a long slope called the Royal Mile. Halfway down the mile is St. Giles Cathedral, whose tower and crown date from the 15th century. South of St. Giles is the Grassmarket area, full of quaint shops and pubs. In medieval times, this was the site of the city gallows. On Candlemaker Row, leading out of the east end of Grassmarket, sits the statue of Greyfriars Bobby, in memory of a policeman's terrier dog who watched over his master's grave for 14 years. The policeman, John Gray, was buried in 1848 in the courtyard of Greyfriars Church. To prevent the dog from being destroyed as a stray during its vigil, area residents kept him fed, and the city granted him a special collar. The Royal Mile ends at the Palace of Holyrood House, the Queen's official residence in Scotland. The present building dates from the year 1675. It was here at Holyrood that Mary, Queen of Scots, spent the 6 years of her doomed reign. Along the Royal Mile are small alleyways called closes, appropriately named because centuries ago these were overcrowded tenements packed with residents who wished to live as close to the castle as possible for protection. By the 18th century, the city was crowded, polluted, and threatened by fire and disease. In 1762, a plan was developed for an expansion of the city to the north. Georgian architects called for wide streets and tree-lined squares and building facades in elegant, classical style. Newtown sits above a valley that had for centuries been used as a moat. In 1816, the area was drained, making room for a beautiful city park dubbed Princess Street Gardens. Bordering this green oasis is Princess Street, so busy with shoppers, it's hard to believe that back when Newtown was indeed new, the city council had to bribe merchants to open shops here. The architects of Newtown broke through the city's medieval borders, but never destroyed them. Even today, the harried urbanite need only glance upward for a reminder of the city's ancient beginnings. This pride of place is seen throughout Scotland. In Glasgow's renewed Victorian charm. In the granite splendour of Aberdeen. And the sturdy craft on the Isle of Skye. From the tranquil beauty of the River Tweed to the unlocked mysteries of Loch Ness, Scotland is a land of staid tradition and romantic splendour, a land that continues to beckon travellers to answer its call.
British Airways brings 24 million people together. British Airways, the world's favorite airline.
World travel, filled with action, excitement, and adventure. International Video Network's Video Visits are your ticket to the world. These exciting video programs will whisk you away to more than 50 fascinating destinations on 6 continents. Breathtaking photography heightens the beauty and grandeur of the world's greatest cities and countries. Entertaining as well as informative, Video Visits are a great way to relive memorable vacations, plan your next trip, or just to satisfy your curiosity of exotic locales. From the pulsating sounds of Carnival in Rio to the peaceful serenity of Ireland's countryside, each video visit will transport you to the actual location. Video Visits also feature authentic ethnic music providing insights into the different cultures of the world. Whether it be an Irish Colleen singing a traditional folk song, or the boisterous Oktoberfest in Munich. You'll examine the people of today's ever-changing world, discovering the similarities and differences that makes each of them unique, from the native Eskimos of Alaska to the Buddhist monks of China. Bring the world into your home by visiting such sites as all these and many more exciting destinations are waiting to be discovered by you now. Also available is the Reader's Digest Great National Park Series, Yosemite, Yellowstone, and the Grand Canyon. Crown jewels of America's national park system are available for your viewing pleasure.